Here are 4 different AI tools, and today I'm going to be comparing them. This video probably is going to last about an hour. It's running at 2x speed, but it's still going to take a long time. I'm not sure why anyone would actually want to watch this and watch me type, but I'm putting it up primarily because I want people to be able to jump to a specific part and see the thing that they want to know about a particular AI tool. I am comparing CoPilot and Cursor, which is a full-blown editor, Codium, which is another plugin like CoPilot from a different company with a different pricing model. And then the last one is PyCharm, which is from JetBrains and their AI model. What I'm using to, and none of those 4 products are incentivizing me to do this. None of them are I'm not being paid by any of them, any of that kind of thing. What I'm using to actually do the testing is a website called CodeCrafters. And there is a link, an affiliate link to CodeCrafters if you are interested in doing that, in the description and probably in the pinned comment. If you go through that link, then I'll get some kind of commission. So if that's something that you might want to be interested in doing, I would appreciate it if you go through that link. The way this tool works, CodeCrafters, is they have various challenges. And the challenge that I'm doing at the moment is to create your own simple web server, HTTP server. So what I decided to do when comparing all of these tools is using a third party that's not associated with any of the tools, using the instructions for that to tell the AI what to do, and then seeing how the AI does. The first thing that you do, you clone a repository, and that's specific to that instance. Normally it's one person, one repository, but in this case I've got 4 different ones because I've got 4 different editors. And then the first thing you do is you clone the repository, and then you do a really simple, you check out what's in the repository, you uncomment a thing, you check it in, the test run, and then you know you're done. Or not done, but you're done with that part of the challenge and you know you're all set up. So that's complete. I have now done that for all 4 of the tools. So now I'm starting the actual AI part. And the idea here is I'm going to grab chunks of the instructions, and I'm going to tell the AI what to do that to the best that I can, especially until at least they run into problems. I'm trying to copy and paste the same set of instructions to each one of the AIs so they all have the same chance to try to get the right answer. The way this works is you basically, you write your code, or in this case have the AI write the code, and then you commit that to Git, and then you push that up to the server, and as soon as it gets pushed to the server, it runs on their server like it's a CI/CD continuing integration automation test thing. And it tells you whether you passed or not, and if you passed, then you can click go to the next stage and that kind of thing. This first challenge is very simple. It's just basically whatever the server sends you, go ahead and send back a 200 OK. The first 3 of the AIs all get it wrong the first time. And I didn't wait and get it all fixed. I ran through all of them individually and gave all of them the same thing, and then saw whether or not they got it right, and then went back and fixed each one. That's a pattern I think I tried to use through most of it, although it's possible that there are times that I didn't. In the bottom left-hand corner there, you can see what I'm typing. Sometime during the video, I'm going to change it so that it's only showing things that aren't obvious, like Command S and Command Z and that kind of thing. And yes, I'm on a Mac because I figure you don't need to see what I'm typing in 2 different places. So at this point, PyCharm, in order to turn the AI, wanted me to restart. So I cut out the part of the video where PyCharm was basically installing the update and rebooting and then enabling AI and accepting the terms of service and all that crap, because I figure you don't care. There are only 2 cuts in this video. That's one of them. And the other one is later, when there was one stage that I forgot to click the go to the next stage button. And so I ran the tests, or I uploaded the code. It ran the tests, but it was running the test for the previous challenge. And so I thought it had passed, but it actually hadn't. So I had to fix that later. And then I edited that in to into that part of the code. You will see when that happens. It's close to the end. And there will be another big thing that pops up on the screen that says, hey, there was a change here. Oops. So here we are watching the first real difference between the 4 AIs. So JetBrains is the only one that realized at this point that the way that you send stuff back to the client was by using the client socket and not the server socket. The first 3 AIs all tried to send stuff back from the server socket, which doesn't work. The problem is that JetBrains knew it was supposed to use the client socket, but it didn't. The client socket wasn't defined. So I had to tell it, hey, this doesn't work. And it had to give me the code to create the definition of the client socket. And it tried a couple of things before it finally got to the point where it knew how to do that correctly. This was I found JetBrains, which is kind of sad because they're the editor company. I found their AI, their editor integration, to be the worst. It had the most, it was the most fiddly. It took me the longest to get to the point where I could get it to try to make the changes itself. The thing you have to click on is called basically insert code at caret, which didn't make any sense to me because I had a whole block that was selected. And so I was basically doing insert code over selection. And the idea of a caret didn't make any sense to me because I was using it with stuff selected. So it was odd. But at this point, at least, whatever AI is backed by or is backing the JetBrains AI did the best job of this. This first task. Later on, it gets confused. It tries to be fancy about how it splits headers out, and that it takes a while to get to the point where it figures out because something gets messed up with that, and I end up having to help it, but we'll talk about that when it gets there. So at this point, I'm going through all of the first 3 that didn't get it right the first time. And I'm telling them, hey, that didn't work. Go fix it. I lost the terminal, apparently. There we go. Sorry about all these backspaces and arrows and stuff. At some point, I will turn that thing off. And now we're to cursor. And this is kind of the way I try to do the debugging through the whole thing. Is I'll select the chunk of code that's relevant, and I'll say, hey, this is what happened. Go fix it. And both of the 2 middle ones did a pretty good job of figuring out, immediately, oh yeah, this is what needed to happen. I'm not sure. It's possible that if I had given the AIs the whole thing the first time, they would have done a better job of that. By the time we get later in the project, I'm just selecting the whole file every time. And sometimes that helps and sometimes it doesn't. As this went on, I did a better job of figuring out how to use the editors. None of these were ones. The cursor's the one I'd used the most before, which is the second one in the row. The other ones, at least lately. The other ones I hadn't used as much, and also I kept getting confused about which keystrokes went with which editors because they all use slightly different things. Well, JetBrains uses a bunch of completely different things. But I got better at doing a good job of figuring out, oh yeah, this one I need to use it this way. But the goal of this is not really, how well can Carl use the editor. The goal of this is more how well does the AI do on a set of objective tasks relative to other AIs, and what kinds of stuff do they get right and what kinds of stuff do they get wrong. I would say, kind of cutting to the chase, CoPilot is by far the worst. By far the worst. When we get to the very last challenge, I ended up giving up and not even finishing. JetBrains, the last one, it did the best job on the very first challenge. And there are a couple of other times that it did stuff that was more clever. But sometimes it got to the point where it was too clever for it to debug, and I had to help it. This right here, this bit with CoPilot, that thing on line 16, where it's saying if the client address is equal to 4221, that will never be true. And I will have to come back and fight with it some more later. But that was just a dumb... That's just an idiotic thing that the AI did. And I kept trying to tell it, oh, you need to fix this, and I never could get it to do it, and I ended up fixing it myself. But none of the other ones had that problem. It was just GitHub Copilot. It was, like I said, it was by far the worst of all of these. So this is Codium. I hadn't talked as much about it. So Codium is a plugin for Visual Studio, or probably other editors, but Visual Studio is the only one I've used it with. And it does more or less as well as Cursor, which is a dedicated editor. The difference is Codium, at least at the moment, is free for individuals, and they charge for teams, whereas whereas Cursor you wouldn't have to pay for. And I do pay for Cursor. I pay for the JetBrains AI. I pay for CoPilot. I will probably turn off what I'm paying for CoPilot and JetBrains AI unless I decide that doing these regularly is worth keeping the subscriptions around for. But Codium, I would say, assuming that the prices stay the same, is the best value because it's very close, if not just as good as Cursor. And I think Cursor was the best, except Cursor's like, I don't know, $9 or $10 a month at the moment, from what I remember, or at least I think that's what I pay for it. Codium, like I said, at the moment is free. So assuming the prices stay the same, Codium, I would say, is by far the best deal. If you're an individual, and then if you end up using it for a team, then there's a charge for that. But you're paying as an individual and as a team for all the other ones. So it seems like a decent deal, and they're not paying me to say that. Like I said, the one thing that I will get paid for, if you care, in this video is the Code Crafters, the thing on the left. The challenges, that website, there's a affiliate link for in the description. It's actually kind of cool. They've got a bunch of challenges that are not just the HTTP one. I picked the HTTP one because most of the people, from what I understand, that follow my channel do web stuff, at least to some extent. And I found that a lot of the web developers that I work with actually have no idea how a web server actually works and have no idea how the HTTP protocol actually works. And so having some low-level understanding of how that protocol works is actually really useful. Even from a vocabulary standpoint, often I'll talk about, HTTP 301 or something like that, and people look at me like I have three heads because they have no idea what the actual codes are underneath the covers. When you're troubleshooting things and you're actually inspecting packets and looking at what's going on, being able to look at, oh, okay, I know that that's a redirect or whatever, can be really handy. So I think it's actually really useful for developers these days, and especially web developers, to have an understanding of how the web servers work under the covers. I mean, they have a bunch of other challenges that are really cool. It's a website that I like and I have fun playing with. Even though I think most of the stuff that they are trying to get me to do and I wish they had more tests, more challenges that dealt with error handling. I will talk to them some more about that. But I think it's a cool tool. And if that's something that was interesting to you, I can highly recommend getting it and playing with it, because learning more about what's going on under the covers will set you apart from most of the developers that you're working against. So here we are in CoPilot land, trying to convince CoPilot that what it has done isn't working. And eventually I will get to the point where I'm trying to convince CoPilot that the port that it's looking for is just not the right port. I'll eventually tell it to print out some stuff. But at the moment, so the whole idea of this, there are some points in this. One was coming up before too long. There are some points coming up with this that I just get so frustrated that I give up and just manually fix it. But the idea was to get the AI to do as most of the work as possible. And in the event that I have to actually intervene and type something in manually to make the AI, to go around the AI, that's a fail, basically, in my book. By the way, I am not recording this voiceover as I'm typing, as I'm working. I recorded the whole thing. I am playing it back at 2x speed, and I'm talking over it at 2x speed. So if you believe it, this thing would actually be twice as long if you were watching me do it actually live. I can't imagine that anybody would watch this whole thing, although for some reason people probably will, at least somebody, maybe just to say that they did. But if you know, it's going to be long and annoying enough just as an hour, or however long it ends up being. If it's twice as long, that would be like ridiculous. But the main reason that I'm doing this is so that I can have specific parts and I can jump into, so here I am turning off all the arrows so that you won't see the arrows in the backspaces all the time anymore, because it got annoying. Sorry, I should have done that to start with, but I didn't realize it was going to be that bad when I was holding the arrow keys down. So there will be points in this video that a particular AI does something particularly stupid, and then I will jump to that particular part of the video. I will make so there's going to be a summary video, hopefully you've seen already, although I haven't made it yet, that basically summarizes how all of the different AIs fared compared to each other. And in that video, I'm going to be able to jump to or link to specific time codes in this video, so that if somebody wants to get more information about exactly how a particular AI did something right or wrong, they can figure it out. At this point, I have turned on debugging, which is actually a handy thing for you to know about. And then I'm running it again, and I'm trying to figure out, so I can tell the AI, hey, this is exactly what the client sent. This is what it got back. This is what it was supposed to get back. At the moment, while I'm typing, so at the point that I was recording the video for this, is at the point that I was recording the screenshot, I didn't know what it was doing wrong. And so I was trying different things and comparing it to the other thing and trying to troubleshoot and trying to figure out what it was that was doing wrong. And as I remember, we'll see in a minute, or a few minutes, but as I remember, I never could get it to to do this correctly, and so I ended up just overriding it. What it is doing is it's comparing, I don't know if you know how TCP works, but basically every TCP connection has an IP address of the client, an IP address of the server, a port on the client, and a port on the server. And that combination of those four numbers have to be unique. The port on the server is generally determined. In this case, the port on the server is 4221. The port on the client is randomly determined. And in this case, what's going on is the CoPilot has decided to check and see what port the client is using. That's what that second client address number is. And it's comparing the random port that the client is using to the fixed port that the server is using. So that should be, if it was going to make any sense, that would be if server address equals 4221, except that would always be true. And so there's no reason to actually have an if statement there. So it makes no sense that the AI is doing this, and it makes no sense that that there's no meaning, no value to that if statement. My guess is it just saw, oh, okay, there's a number up here. Let me make an if statement to see if something is equal to that number, because I'm used to seeing that in patterns. But it's an utterly nonsensical if statement to put in there, and it's just making things worse. Here I am going back and trying to figure out, what is it that it's doing wrong compared to the first one? Because at this point, when I was actually typing, at this point, I think I was guessing wrong about what the actual problem was. And it didn't occur to me till a little while later that the problem was actually the client address thing. And this kind of shows, I talk sometimes, I'll probably talk more about code reviews. And I talk a lot about testing, and I talk a lot about what's going to happen when AI does bad things and we have to clean it up. Since that if address thing since that if statement is completely nonsensical, it was not obvious to me that that was the thing that was wrong. And so I expected that there were, I was looking at the split specifically because the way that this one did the split is a little different than the way the other one did. And so off the top of my head, I thought maybe it was the split that was causing the problem. Because I didn't really understand what that if statement did, and I hadn't stopped and really thought about it, about what client address was and what server address was in the Python API. That's not my... I've spent a lot of time writing web servers and doing that kind of stuff. I've never tried to do it in Python before, so the off-the-cuff, what do these APIs do, doesn't come naturally to me in Python because I haven't. Yeah, that was weird. I told it to print some stuff, and it printed out. It's like, okay, I'm going to print this variable that doesn't actually exist. It's like, okay. Instead of that should just... Theoretically, I should have just let that fail and then told the AI, hey, you weren't supposed to do that, but I just deleted it. There were a lot of times with CoPilot that it was like, okay, well, if I'm playing fair, I ought to just run what the CoPilot told me to run, except the thing that CoPilot told me to run was just stupid. See, here's the point where I figured out, because I printed out what the numbers are, I'm telling it, hey, you're trying to compare this, the server number against the client number. That's never going to work. And I never could get the AI to understand what the hell I was talking about. And I kept trying to describe to the AI, hey, you did this wrong. You're checking this thing against that thing, and those never going to be true. Fix that. And it just never could figure it out. It's like, well, now you've made it worse, right? Instead of comparing, I don't know why it kept asking me for the microphone. So now instead of I just Control Z out of that, or Command Z out of that one, because instead of fixing the if statement it was supposed to fix, it just added an additional and host equals localhost to the end of it, which is like, okay, well, that doesn't make any sense. That's not going to help at all. Yeah, and finally, I just said, to heck with it. I told it to take the if statement out, which I don't think it ever would have figured out how to do on its own. So this one basically is a fail. I don't know how long or if I ever would have been able to get it to get this right. I might have just wiped the entire file and like told it to start over from scratch and just hoped that it hadn't got confused about wanting to put that same if statement in again. I don't know. Yeah, so now I decided basically I'm going to grab the entire challenge text and paste that in. So here we will send it to the server and see what we get. And given that it's CoPilot, we'll call it attempt 1 because chances are. Yep. All right, let's try the next one. Paste that in. Notice I've forgotten to click to mark the previous stage as complete. So I think I do that here in a sec. One point later in the video, I forgot to do that. So you'll see that when it comes up. So now I can submit this. Worked out of the box. Now on to Codium. See, this one's weird because it actually removes the server socket definition, which means this isn't going to work. I'm not sure if I actually realized that at the time. I'm not sure. I don't know. Maybe if I'd given it the whole file, it would have been better. That's what I ended up doing later in the thing. So I'm not sure if that's my fault because it assumed more context than it had. I don't know. One of the things that I've discovered is it seems reasonable to assume that the editors know the entire contents of the file that you're asking them to make changes to. They don't always act like that's the case, though. Sometimes they seem to get it, and sometimes they don't. So I'm not actually sure what the intent is from the AI authors about exactly what context you are or are not supposed to give it. Which is, I mean, it's one of the problems with AI, right? There's the whole how much context can it take problem. So we will try this again. So it gets this right, but you notice that it removed the bare slash condition. So that's going to fail. Which is another thing that AIs do a lot, is you ask them to add a new feature, and they add the new feature, but in the process they forget about an old feature that they used to have working and break that. That said, a lot of humans do that too. That's the whole point of regression tests. That's the whole point of most, as far as I'm concerned, automated test suites, is it prevents you from going backwards. You can still screw up, and you probably will, but at least the things that used to work will continue to work. And there we go. And now on to JetBrains. I really appreciate the fact that JetBrains put a try except block there. That's the way it should work in the real world. Unfortunately, I don't think in this one, but in in a challenge or two, it gets confused and goes off the rails. Yeah, so here, this is a great one. So it went and fixed a bunch of stuff, but in the process, it ended up blowing the indentation of the file. So nothing works anymore. And this happened several times. It turns out AIs are not really good at keeping track of the amount of white space and the correct amount of white space in a given file, which for a lot of languages isn't a big deal, but for Python, it's fatal. So I ended up having to jump through a bunch of hoops. I mean, I could have just corrected it, but the idea was to try to get the AI to do as much as possible. So I ended up having to go through a bunch of hoops just to get the thing to indent stuff correctly. Yeah, and it doubled up the import socket. I just took that out manually. I could have had the UI do it or the AI do it, but there we go. So a little bit of help there with the indentation. Oh, CoPilot. Here I am kind of looking at what Cursor did right compared to what CoPilot did wrong. And then I'm trying to get back exactly the text that I pasted into Cursor, but it doesn't seem to have a way of getting that back to me, which is kind of irritating. So I end up going back to CoPilot and telling it what I think the same thing I gave Cursor was, but I can't swear that it is, which is kind of unfortunate. Yeah, there's no way to get the history back from any of these, so there just isn't a good way to. As soon as you copy and paste and lose it, I could have done something where I kept track of multiple clipboards, but I didn't for this test. So I mean, I don't think this helps at all with. I don't think this is at all a cause of CoPilot not doing well. That I potentially gave it a different. A different set of instructions than I did the two that worked or the others that worked, but it is what it is. And I don't think CoPilot could have pulled it off anyway, because, man, it's a mess. I'm still not sure when you say that worked in the previous version. I don't know if it's got enough history to actually understand what the previous version was. Or if it just got it right. I don't know. Mark them all as complete. Except I missed one. Grab all the text. Select the whole file. Paste in the challenge. Cursor has the best editor integration, which makes sense since it's all one package as opposed to an editor plus a plugin. You'll note there that I forgot to advance the stage for Codium again. I keep forgetting to do that, which is not the AI's fault, and it's not Codecrafter's fault. It's just doing a bunch of stuff. Don't always do the best job of keeping track of it all because I find it tedious and I get forgetful about stuff. One of the things about me being a programmer is I'm motivated to not do tedious stuff. I prefer automating stuff so that I don't have to do the tedious stuff, and that makes me motivated to write code to automate things. But it means when I am either having to do something manually, or it means that when I'm doing something that's more or less a one-off and it's not worth trying to automate, that when I'm doing the same thing over and over again, I tend to mess up from time to time. So this is a rat hole. Basically, it takes me a while to figure out what's going on, but the way that JetBrains is doing this, it's trying to parse the request into a dictionary that contains all the headers. And that's useful in theory. That's the way you would normally do it in the real world because it makes it a lot easier to deal with. The problem is it's more complicated, so that makes it a harder task to do. And the way that the try exception block is there, what happens is the part where it's trying to get to the URL never ends up getting there because during the header part of the try, it's jumping to the exception block, and it's not obvious that that's what's happening. So here I am trying to troubleshoot what's going on or trying to get the AI to troubleshoot what's going on inside the user agent block, when in fact that's not where the problem is at all. The problem is up like the second or third line of the try statement. I eventually figured that out, but this ends up being, I don't know, 6 or 7 different iterations trying to get the UI to finally figure out what the heck was wrong, and ended up having to basically do the debugging myself and then tell the AI, hey, effectively my debugging is telling me that this is the thing you're doing wrong, go fix it. And as I've said before, I think in this, if not, I think I said it in the other video, which hopefully you watched first, that I find the editor integration in PyCharm the worst of all 4 of them, which is actually really unfortunate considering, aside from Cursor, it's the only one where the same company controls both. So you'd think it would actually be a good user experience, but I find it to be by far the worst of the 4. Not in terms of the code it generates, but in terms of the actual having the interface with the editor. Now, it's possible, since it's different, the other 3 are at least based on VS Code. It's possible that if I was more familiar, I've been using JetBrains products for, I don't know, maybe even a decade by now. But I don't use them exclusively, and I don't use them all that often. And I've been using more Visual Studio Code type stuff recently. So maybe I'm just more used to that. I don't know. It's possible that someone will find the way that JetBrains does it intuitive, but I certainly didn't. Yeah, it's also, so the generate thing there underneath refactor, that's a whole different kind of generation. It's not AI generation. So the fact that there's two different menu options that both say generate, that mean two different, completely different things, drives me crazy. So you have to go to AI and then generate code as opposed to scrolling down and just clicking generate. And so here I am thinking that the user agent is the problem when in fact all of the ones will fail. It's just that the user agent one seems to be the one it's trying first, and so that's the one that it's telling me is failing first. But in fact, if I had tried to just have it do, if I had some way rewound to the very first challenge, it would have failed that too, because the way it's parsing the headers is what's actually exploding. And it took me a while to figure that out, and the AI never did figure that out. See here, I'm discovering that when I try to print the header dictionary isn't actually getting printed. And I'm trying to figure out why that is. So I finally figured out that, oh, okay, it's jumping the exception block. And I hadn't until just then realized, so on the left-hand side there, in the yellow, where it says your _ program as opposed to test or whatever, it wasn't, I didn't look at it close enough to realize that, oh, that meant that the not enough values was what my program was spitting out, what JetBrains program was spitting out, not what, it wasn't a result of some problem in the test. So here we go again. So now it's not bombing anymore, but it's creating a header dictionary that's empty, which means the if URL is user agent and the user agent is defined, which in this case it's not. So still empty. Okay, so what we're seeing is that the stuff that's supposed to go into the headers is actually still in the request line. So I tried changing max split there, but doesn't turn out to, that is the problem. So I just put it back. I thought maybe it was a quick fix. Because at this point I was getting tired of waiting for the AI to figure it out, and I just kind of wanted to move on, but seems like that would have been an easier thing, and it screwed up the indentation again. Python is just really frustrating about that. This is not the kind of debugging that's useful, and it's not the kind of bugging that would be reasonable for someone to do if they don't know how to code. This definitely falls into the it would have just been easier to do it myself category. And I think that would actually have been true even if I was a junior programmer. But finally it gets it right. Yay. And sigh, back to CoPilot. I've used CoPilot off and on. I don't usually use it like this. Usually I'm very specific about what I want it to do. It was not really obvious to me until I did this experiment exactly how much worse CoPilot was than all of the other tools. I was honestly just kind of really shocked at how bad it was, because I had never tried to use more than one of the AI tools on the same project before. I've started using Cursor more often, just because the editor integration is the best, which, like I said, it makes sense since for Cursor, the editor, the AI plugin comes packaged with the editor, so the experience is better. I have to pay for that. I do pay for that. It's around the same amount of money that I pay for CoPilot. I don't remember exactly, and I'm not going to go look it up. They're roughly, I think, both $10 a month-ish. But it's just, I'm kind of astounded because I knew that the editor integration was better in Cursor. And so I preferred that, but it wasn't at all obvious to me. Because, like I said, I've never tried to get the AI to do a whole, like, here's a challenge, go do that, and I'm not going to help you kind of thing. Usually it's like, okay, I know at this point that I've got a particular function that I want written, and here's what I want it to do. Go write go write as much of it as you can, and then I'll go fill in whatever needs to get filled in. So I'm using the AIs here in a way that I've never used them before, and it's, I think, more similar to the way that someone who's not technical would be using them, which I think is probably more of the way that, I don't know if it's more the way they're intended to be used, but it's more the way that I think they advertise themselves as being used. I think the marketing pitch seems to be, you can use these instead of having to know how to program, and that does not seem to be the case at all. I really don't know. They're on line, 40? That response body is hello world. I have no idea why it decided it wanted to start doing that. It's just nuts. You know, and at this point, I'm just very frustrated, and I'm trying to clean up some of the stuff manually because I'm tired of CoPilot wasting my time. See, I fixed the indentation there myself instead of trying to get it to do it, which I guess I did that for JetBrains 2 a little bit ago. Yeah, and at this point, the 404 logic has fallen off, I think. Yeah, so it put echo logic in the end there with the 404, so I just jumped back to a previous version. Yay. CoPilot was so bad. So all this is take the thing you're already running and just running in a loop. And happily, pretty much I think all of them got this right off. So this one was a simple kind of across the board, as I remember. Yay, CoPilot passed something the first time. I just can't believe how bad CoPilot is. I really like Cursor's interface. I'm not sure how hard it would be to get that interface without having to ship your own bespoke version of Visual Studio Code. Now, you've noticed that I'm screwing up here. So all the other ones are currently on the current connection task, but the Codium one that I just did, it was still one behind. So there was one point where I didn't click go to the next stage when I should have. And I'm going through and doing all of this stuff, assuming that Codium is in lockstep with all the other ones, but in fact, it's still one step earlier. So every time I'm running Encodium at the moment, I'm running one set of tests earlier than the set of tests I thought I was running. All right, so here I'm going from read header to concurrent, and on all the other ones, I'm going from concurrent to return a file. Yeah, I love the way it's like I'm pasting in paragraphs and paragraphs to JetBrains, but it only gives me one line to type in. So it's like impossible to go back and format anything or any of that kind of stuff. It's just the user interfaces. It shocks me that it's so bad. I'm guessing it might be because the editor has existed for so long, and it existed for so long before AI that they just couldn't make too many changes with it without confusing it or something. So here it is, and I'm thinking that it's doing a good job. when in fact I'm not. Like I said, I'm not running the test that I think I'm running. So this is the part where I did an edit. I'm basically jumping to, so this is a video that was recorded after all the other videos, once I realized that I had screwed up. And so I came back and did the return of file piece. The problem here is that Codium is not running decode correctly on the file name string. And so it's getting an error that it's trying to add a string and, a string data and binary data, which is a really easy fix. And as soon as I tell it, oh yeah, that's the problem, it gets it right away. So that was pretty simple. I had kind of messed this up because I had not been keeping up and clicking the go to the next stage thing correctly, like I should have. Okay, so that worked. And now I'm going to jump back. So now we're back to the first set of recordings. So I just inserted that one block that just ended for Codium that I recorded after all of this was over, once I realized that I had missed the set of tests I thought I was running. Cursor does its usual. That's not even close to right. So I jumped back to a previous version because it totally screwed everything up. Yeah, so now I tried trying to put it in a different place. You see it's like defining a function in the middle of so the def handle files request is inside the def handle clients function. So it's like totally lost the thread of where in the file it is. It's a complete mess. And I was like, I'm tired of dealing with this. So I decided I was just going to take that and move it up. It's like, okay, so it wrote it. It just got confused about where it was supposed to be writing it. So I decided I would just take it, I would manually move it up to the top and manually indent it correctly. So I don't know what it would have taken for CoPilot to get this right. I was looking for an automatic indent there, but yeah, good luck with that. Because Python. And it's still not working. So at this point, I've pretty much given up on trying to get the AI to do anything. And I'm just like, I just decided I was done. Thanks for watching this whole thing, for whatever reason you decided to do that. Bye.